was the Penang Nyonya, a strong, feisty woman who was also a fabulous cook. When she was in the late 60s, she had to undergo 3 operations because she had to fight a rare form of biliary cancer. In the last 6 months of her life, she called me often to her bedside. Kim Lai, Jie Peng, come and sit here beside me, bring your notebook. She called me to her bedside not to complain of her pain or suffering. She called me because she wanted to pass on her recipes. All her favorite recipes, all the family favorites, her divine asam laksa, her otak-otak, her koi pai tea recipe. I could sense her urgency, her desire to pass on something which was precious to her. Although she knew she was dying, what was precious to her need not have to die with her. All our human lives have to come to an end someday, but our cultural heritage, especially our intangible cultural heritage, must live on. I am a 6th-generation Nyonya. I come from a rather unusual and unique community called the Babas and Nyonyas, also known by these interchangeable terms. The Babas is the word for the males, and Nyonya is the word for the females. Although we have been around for hundreds of years, not much is known about us. It all started more than 700 years ago, way back in the 14th century, when Chinese traders came from China, traveled down south towards ports in Southeast Asia. Relying on the monsoon winds, they sojourned in port cities like Malacca, Penang, and Singapore, as well as other parts of Southeast Asia, Phuket, Batavia, and Java. Unaccompanied by the women folk, many of them intermarried with the local women. It was from these cross-cultural encounters, these interesting cross-cultural liaisons, that slowly, gradually, a community called the Babas and Nyonyas emerged, along with a very fascinating fusion syncretic culture, with a mix from Chinese, Malay, Javanese, Batak, Balinese, Indian, Thai, Burmese, and even elements from European cultures. The Portuguese conquered Malacca, followed by the Dutch, and then the British. Here's a photograph from a family album of a Baba wedding. And you can see the interesting mix of all the various cultures in this photograph. The house and the architecture of the house is very Chinese. Words on the lanterns are Chinese. And you can see even the curtains are tied in a very symmetrical fashion. The father of the bride is dressed in a Chinese jacket, and the bridegroom looks very dapper in his Western outfit. But look at the local women. Not quite Chinese, not quite Malay, a lot of champo, right? And they dress in the traditional costume of the region, in baju panjang and in sarongs. Even the bride is in a sarong. And you can tell which is a bride, right? Her whole chest is laden with jewelry. And the posture of the women is very interesting, seated in a very formidable position, with feet planted firmly in the ground. And the matriarch, not the patriarch, the matriarch is seated in the center of the photograph, looking very in command. A favorite photograph of mine is this from my family album. The little boy there is my father. Grandpa looks quite Malay, again, not quite Chinese, with his favorite pocket watch in his Chinese jacket. And Grandma is the one who looks very relaxed, with her arm on the armchair, her feet almost coming out of her slippers. Notice the Nyonyas do not have bound feet. And the background in the photograph attests to the love for all things English, very European, probably a grand English country house. So, they call us OCBC. Orang Cina bukan Cina. Chinese, but not quite Chinese. Actually, we're actually very proud of our Chinese identity. We give ourselves Chinese names. We practice Chinese rites and rituals. We carry out ancestor worship, and we celebrate Chinese religions and festivals most religiously and avidly. We speak a kind of a Creole language, a very fascinating Malay patois with many Hokkien words as well as other loan words. And you can see some Hokkien words here, tia, lo ting, pang king, chim che, and so on, right? We speak in Malay, but we have got lots of Hokkien words in it. In the past, many Babas could not speak Chinese. For example, my father could only speak English and Baba Malay. I'm a little bit more multilingual in my generation. And I can speak Cantonese as well. But I can't speak any Mandarin. The only Mandarin expression I know is 我爱你. And of course, I know one more Mandarin expression, 你爱我吗? And one very famous aspect of Nyonya cuisine, one very famous aspect of Peranakan culture is the Nyonya cuisine. Fabulous, wonderful dishes. I don't know whether you've tried them. With lots of herbs and spices. The Nyonyas use leaves like daun pandan, daun kesum, and flowers like bunga kantan, bunga telang. And it's a wonderful mix of Western, Malay, Chinese, Indian, Portuguese mixtures and techniques in the cuisine. You can see some dishes here, otak, and roti babi shows that they love their pork dishes, and also dishes like sek bak, hong bak. So we've got Chinese names, English names, and also mix of languages, for example, chinchaluk omelette or itik tim. And I too love cooking. I learned how to cook from my mother. You see a photograph of a delicious prawn egg salad, and trust the Nyonyas. For the dressing, they don't use olive oil. My mother has a recipe where she uses santan and sambal belacan. Can you imagine sambal belacan dressing? I grew up in a Peranakan household. I grew up in an antique pre-war house in the heart of Kuala Lumpur. And my mother comes from Ai Itam in Penang. So I've got links to the Penang Peranakan community. You'll see her here in a beautiful white kabaya and a lovely sarong. Unfortunately, the sarongs are no more in our possession because when we cremated my mother, we put in all the sarongs into the coffin. So sadly, those beautiful vintage sarongs are not in our possession anymore. And it's very hard to get these beautiful batik tulis sarongs nowadays. And my father is a Baba from Malacca. You see him here, looking very handsome, standing in front of his hillman. So as I grew older, one by one, family members passed away. And there were many stories in my family which I realized were very, very precious. Grandma was a wonderful storyteller, so was my Ama Che from China, who used to tell us stories of her life in China, where she was suffering from a famine and so on. And mother, too, was a wonderful storyteller. So as I grew older, I was concerned, where are our stories? All too often, we need to capture our lives and our lifestyles in stories. And stories are a wonderful expression of a shared memories and diversity. So I have been putting short stories into fiction. Over the past 8 years, I've been writing short stories. And the first collection of short stories, I decided to name it after the kabaya, the beautiful blouse of the Nyonyas. And this, you can see, is a lovely white kabaya which belonged to my grandmother. It's called a kabaya renda. And if you look at the lace, usually the Nyonyas like butterflies, bees, and flowers. But if you look at this lace motif here, what do you see? It's a picture of a biker with gloves, leather boots, even a crash helmet. So very unusual, a biker sarong, 80 years old. And also the Nyonyas love jewelry. They love color or neatness, delicate things, and usually they would never wear sarong kabaya by itself, but always with jewelry. And they love motifs like flowers, butterflies, bees, as well as roses, lilies, and gorgeous karosangs. The kabaya was held together with a krosang, which is 3 brooches linked with a gold chain. After Sarong Secrets, I decided to write another collection called, after Kabaya Tales, I decided to write another collection called Sarong Secrets. And this time it was named after the sarong. And the Nyonyas loved, again, colorful sarongs. Because they were not bound by any religious taboos, it was not a problem to have animal motifs in the sarongs. So we could have motifs of fishes, for example, which is a symbol of prosperity, butterflies, which is a symbol of love and longevity. And the third collection of stories, I decided to call it after the beautiful manik shoes of the Nyonyas. You can't imagine a Nyonya wearing a sarong kebaya with black leather shoes, right? So they had to have colorful shoes again. And they sourced the beads from countries like the former Czechoslovakia, so even the country is not around anymore, Austria, Bohemia, and spent a lot of time in beading and embroidery. And you can see here a montage of photographs of Baba beaded items. So not only the Nyonyas like color and embellishments, even the Babas too loved beautiful things. And in the past, many of them were very wealthy and were able to spend money in acquiring beautiful Peranakan material culture. You see up there 2 photographs of Baba slippers with very interesting motifs. One is of a family going out for a ride in the car. Below, a beautiful beaded belt with a stack motif, as well as a lovely collar of a wedding attendant. Another montage here of beautiful beaded items. The Nyonyas in the past were not encouraged to become too highly educated. They had to spend time in the home to learn how to be good homemakers, and therefore they had all the time to indulge in very intricate pastimes. We even had cherub cases, pocket watch cases, and even a beaded cover for a magnifying glass, the photograph on your right. I decided, why not write all these wonderful stories? And while it was my wish to entertain, to inform, to educate, to provoke people to laugh or to cry, I did not expect my stories to help people to find their lost identities. So I was very pleasantly surprised when, after a talk I gave at the international school, a young girl came up to me, I think around 18 years old, and said that she was really thrilled because after reading the stories, she found out that she was actually 25% Nyonya. Her ancestry was actually Peranakan. She said that as she read the stories, she felt that it reminded her very strongly of her grandmother. The words, the swear words, my grandmother used to swear, chelaka, chelaka. The expressions used, the lifestyles, the costumes, they all reminded her of her grandmother because in every photograph, between every story, I have montage and visuals of all the lovely kebayas and the costumes. So she called up her sister and said, hey, gee, what do you think? And the sister said, yeah, I think we are also Nyonya. And another guiding principle in my life is that when you do something, your passion also can go on to inspire others. And just 2 weeks ago, I got an email from a Malaysian composer, Juni Chow, based in New York, who said he was very inspired by my stories, especially the story, The House of Smells and Noises. He was tasked to write a musical composition which had to be based on Asian stories. And so he wrote a beautiful piece inspired by The House of Smells and Noises. And that story in itself was inspired by my own mother's passion for cooking. All the wonderful smells that came out of the kitchen, the smell of sambal belacan being toasted, the smell of a wonderful tangy tamarind curry, and inspiration further begets inspiration. So we all have our unique stories. We all have our roots. We all have a cultural identity. But all too often, our Asian sense of modesty works against us. We feel that, no, we're not interested, my stories are not good enough. But actually, we all have a wealth of a cultural heritage. Do you know your stories? Have you talked to your parents? Have you listened, really listened to the stories of your parents or your grandparents? Do you know who your great-grandparents are? I just found out in May this year that my great-grandmother was a Siamese lady. So the world, faced with globalization and mass communication, yearns for fresh ideas and new perspectives. Homogeneity is boring. Look into your garden. Look into your backyard. Who knows, maybe right there, right under your very nose, could be wonderful ideas. Look into your stories. Who knows? Maybe you too could find something interesting that you could use to contribute to make our world a richer and more beautiful place. Thank you. 谢谢。